This isn't my Airbnb.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Empathetic Wanderers. My name is Jeff, and on this channel I give you ways to deepen your travel experience and hopefully make rather inaccessible situations more accessible. If that's content that you like, specifically Asia content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any other content that I'm putting out every single week. Today's video is going to be a little bit different, just to explain a really bad Airbnb situation that I experienced in Japan. So the first thing that I want to say before I get into the whole story is I have never had a problem with Airbnb. Like, there have definitely been times where the Airbnb maybe wasn't exactly what I imagined, or maybe it was a bit smaller or further away than like from the city center. But I have never had a scenario where I'm like, oh, I'm in an apartment that's not the apartment that I booked, and that on top of that it was intentional on the host's part. So this is definitely an outlier situation, and specific to Japan, like, there is a level of certainty that you can have that certain things are going to happen a quality way, especially as it relates to accommodations. So every hostel I've stayed in, every Airbnb except this particular one, every hotel I've stayed in Japan has always been great. And so don't freak out or worry, but I just wanted to go through kind of a little bit of my warning signs that I look back on now and I'm like, I should have realized that this was a problem. But also a little bit about Japan and Airbnb, as that has changed in the past couple of years. And so it's important to know what to look for and what's normal and what's not. So I have been to Japan. I live in Japan now, but I have been in Japan many, many times prior to moving, and always stayed in Airbnbs after like a couple times that I had stayed in hostels, because it was just nice to have like a proper kitchen and, you know, all that stuff. But it's obviously a little bit more expensive. So I found this Airbnb because I was going for just under 2 weeks, and I did notice, like, initially the conversation that I was having with the host once I already booked the Airbnb was a little weird. It was a little off. Not anything too crazy. It was just very aggressive. Like, it was very intense about all the rules and very intense about like all the things you needed to know. And it was like 7 pages long of like instruction. And it was very intense about not talking to other people in the building that I was in. And at the time I was like, well, you know, I'm probably reading too much into this. Like, they're probably just an experienced Airbnb. They had a number of reviews that were all good. They're probably just an experienced Airbnb that just knows, like, that if they send a bunch of information, then at least they answer a lot of the questions that they probably get from people that stay there. And if you've ever been to Japan, you know that, like, quietness and respecting your neighbors is a really big deal. So it wasn't like a huge alarm bell for me. It was kind of like, of course I know that, like, you need to walk quietly. Like, apartments are very small, and so it's easy to hear what's going on in other people's apartments. And so it wasn't crazy to me, but it did, like, you know, now in retrospect, I'm like, well, that was like such a sign. So I got the actual address from the Airbnb host, and like maybe 2 days before, which was what they had told me they would do, before I arrived in Japan, and it was in the correct neighborhood that I had booked. And so I got to Japan and I got to this Airbnb, and I walked in, and one of the first things that I do as a YouTuber traveling around, like, I do my Airbnb like tour as I walk in, because if I do it a day or two later, then the bed looks a little bit different because I like have slept in it, or my bags are like, I have to. So I usually just take the opportunity when I walk in to, like, you know, have my bags still all put together at the front door and just do the Airbnb tour in that moment. So I put everything down, but I walk in and, like, I did feel like this is weird, but maybe it's right. And I had only booked it 3 weeks prior to that. So it wasn't like I hadn't seen the photos in so long. So I start doing the tour and I'm showing the place, and it's, fairly, as you can see, it was a very nice place. There was nothing wrong with it for the most part. It had the bathroom, it had the bath, it had a bed, it had Wi-Fi, it had a kitchen and everything. But as I walked into the kitchen, I just noticed like there were a couple things that were off. I really didn't recognize it at all. And I definitely remember thinking I would have remembered noticing how small the fridge was. And so then I'm starting to think like, oh, something's off. So I turned my camera off, I finished up like the video, and I went online and I looked at my Airbnb like reservation, and the place that I had reserved was the room that I was in. And so I was like, I guess I'm crazy. Like, I guess I just thought whatever. So I kind of am going through the motions and getting my things together, and I go and I look at all of the reviews, and all of the reviews are great. So I'm like, okay, again, I look at them again, I guess. I was like, okay, I guess this was where I was supposed to be. And then it dawned on me, and I remembered seeing this photo of Tokyo Tower. And Tokyo Tower, if you don't know, is located like in like Roppongi, like central Tokyo-ish. It's like a major business district area. And I remembered seeing in my Airbnb, like when I was booking it, that there was a view of Tokyo Tower. There was a photo of a view of Tokyo Tower, like outside my window. And I looked at both my windows, and both my windows looked at buildings. And I was like, this is for sure not my Airbnb. So in that moment, I'm like, okay, maybe this was just a mistake. It was weird that all of the photos were different because there was no photo anymore of, a window looking out onto Tokyo Tower. So I messaged the Airbnb host. I said, hey, it looks like there was an issue. It looks like I got sent to the wrong place. Let me know when you get this as soon as possible, because it was like nighttime. And I get a message back, and it's like, it's the same message that the person had sent me 2 days prior of the exact same address. And so it was very clear, like they weren't interested in addressing the situation. And so I'm like, oh, great. Like, what am I going to do? I had booked it for, a week and a half or something like that. And it was an okay place. There was nothing wrong with it, but it really weirded me out, especially now that I was thinking like they were so intense about not talking to other people. And it gave me a really weird vibe, and I had spent money on it. And so fortunately, and this is a pro tip, if you have Wi-Fi in the place, you're able to use Gmail calling. So I used Gmail calling because I didn't have a SIM card to call Airbnb support. And they answered, and the guy was really, really nice. And I explained the situation, and he was like, are you sure they didn't just redecorate? And I'm like, no, this is definitely the wrong place, because prior to the call, I had found my initial email, because every other email that I had received from the person after I booked showed the photos of the apartment that I was in, that I had walked into. But the initial email, when Airbnb first sent me like confirmation email, that had the original photo of the Airbnb that I had thought I was booking. So I knew it was a different Airbnb. I said, I know it's different. I sent him photos on the phone. He couldn't have been nicer. He was really, really helpful. And so he was like, well, let me look into it a little bit. And he put me on hold for a little, and then came back, and he was like, no, it definitely looks like they went ahead and changed everything about the Airbnb the moment that you booked it. So apparently right when I booked it, they changed the photos, they changed the address, they changed the name. And the name is a really, really important part. So before I get to that, the conclusion to all of this is I did get my money back. Airbnb support was like so great. If anyone that works for Airbnb is watching this, thank you. You guys were awesome. And I will definitely continue to use Airbnb specifically because of that. And I did continue to use Airbnb on that trip. I booked a new Airbnb, and I will continue to, because it was really, really helpful, especially in a really stressful situation in a different country. So once we figured out that that was not the same Airbnb, They went ahead and canceled the whole thing, refunded all of my money. I just left immediately because I literally hadn't even opened my bags because it had only been maybe 40 minutes since I had walked into the apartment. And I went out and booked an Airbnb from a Starbucks down the street. So the one important thing to know regarding the name is, so I think it was 2017 that Airbnb passed a law about, Japan passed a law about Airbnbs. And it basically required Airbnbs to register with the government. So if you ever look at Airbnb in Japan, you'll notice that a lot of the names say legal listing or legal Airbnb or licensed Airbnb rental. It's very clear that they're trying to make it clear that they have done their due diligence on applying to be an Airbnb through the Japanese government. And so one of the things that they need to know, which is all okay and like totally understandable if you think it sounds weird, but when you book an Airbnb, they will ask you for your contact information, like your passport, your like a copy of your passport, and then like a bunch of other random things. And that was another like red flag I should have noticed, that this other Airbnb that scammed me did not ask for those things. But when I booked it, the original title was like legal listing Airbnb whatever neighborhood, and they had changed it to a title that didn't have that. So look for Airbnbs that have that title, that specify that they are a licensed Airbnb that the Japanese government has vetted. But yeah, I mean, all in all, it all worked out okay. It was really chaotic, and fortunately I was able to, find an accommodation after that, but it was pretty crazy. And just like, it was kind of like what my worst case scenario has always been in my head about using Airbnb, that this would happen. And, I can say that right after that, the Airbnb I stayed at after that was great and totally worked and everything. But just know that Japan has strict Airbnb laws. They need to have like licensed or legal listing or legal Airbnb, registered Airbnb in the title. If they ask you for a copy of your passport and your information, that is normal. When I have done it, they have been okay with me like redacting like sensitive information, like my actual proper like passport number and stuff like that, but they need to see identification. I've also had Airbnb hosts that have said that they want the copy of it, but it's all been okay, like the copy without redaction, but it's all been okay. So just know what you're doing. Have Airbnb customer support, that number with you, and make sure that you have Gmail calling set up so that you can make a call if you need to. And yeah, just, I guess, go with your gut. I mean, if something feels weird, then question it. But that kind of wraps it up for me. I mean, it all ended up okay, and I got all my money back, and found a new place and had a great time in Japan. So I hope you enjoyed this little kind of story time on my one bad Airbnb experience. If you did, or if you like any content related to Asia, not specific to, bad Airbnb experiences, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the notification bell, as I have a lot of content on Asia. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps. I know that it seems like it's probably not a huge thing, but it really does help YouTube understand what is helpful content. And, let me know in the comments below if you've had an experience like this, or if you have any questions about renting an Airbnb in Japan, because I'm happy to answer those questions. So let's just keep being empathetic, keep wandering, keep spreading positivity. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.